the transfer portal, which doesn't even open for 6 more days. But we already have quite a bit of knowledge and news about people who will go into the portal. And yesterday, some of the big names, Miller Moss, who was USC's starting quarterback for most of the year, Jamari Butler from Nebraska, who was supposed to be Nebraska's best returning defensive lineman. And if you saw that Ohio State game, you're like, oh boy, this is a guy that just about anybody would want. Who else we got? We got quite a few guys. It's
Evan Concepcion from NC State. That's a pretty big one. And Pete Nakos, our guy at On3, is really, really killing it. So if you're not following him on Twitter, I encourage you to do so. And it is like, we were talking about Panini and investing and all that stuff, but like one of my favorite games too, Andy, is trying to project or just like picture like how coveted are these players going to be. Like Miller Moss, for instance, I think he's a perfect example of this. It's like, he played, I think pretty solid football this year before being benched, but there was a point in time not too long ago where we got a question on this show if USC's offense is better without Caleb because it runs, the whole offense runs through the quarterback in a way that isn't so dependent on just the quarterback. And, I thought it was insane at the time, but at the same time,
right.
too, it was like, well, I mean, because that's true for there's no offense that's better without Caleb Williams at the college level. But the point is that there was a point in the not so distant past where Miller Moss looked like the perfect ball distributor. And there are plenty of teams that just need a competent quarterback who can make throws and not make a ton of crippling mistakes in every game. And, it's interesting because like even in the NFL, how many teams have quarterbacks that can't even get a first down, like at the highest level? Like, I mean, you're looking at the Giants right now. The Jaguars are struggling with Mac Jones. I hate to say it, but the Browns with Deshaun Watson, like if you look at what the receivers have done since he got injured, like the quarterback is such an essential piece of the equation here. And if you can just get a guy who they don't have to be a star, but just somebody you think can run your offense, the values of those players could be very inflated. So what is the market for a guy like Miller Moss, someone who got benched at the end of the season at his own team? And then look at the teams that, are reportedly being considered right now. It's like, is he an upgrade at Auburn? Is he a huge upgrade at Michigan? Obviously I think he is at both of those places. Iowa. Like, I mean, there are places that don't have quarterbacks at all that might be willing to pony up just to get somebody like this into their program. So yeah. And it's like, position scarcity is also interesting to me. Like, is this a good year to enter the portal just for your position, even if you're happy where you are? Does your position this year pay a premium? Like a defensive tackle, I think would pay a premium. And it's like almost like the thing that is we don't talk about all the time is, and this happens in pro sports, but it's like even if you're happy at your school, like and you're playing, you're a starter. If you think you can increase your income at the right time, if your agent or whoever's guiding you, finds that the market for your position is worth more than you're being compensated at the place that you're happy at, like, are you going to start seeing portal moves that are just straight money moves? And I know people are going to be like, well, it's already happening. It's already happening. And I'm sure it is. But I think a lot of times it's in conjunction with it not working at where they are. Like, what about things that are going perfectly for you where you are? Do you abruptly leave and go to a place out of nowhere because you can increase your market value? So like this is all uncharted territory, but discussions we're going to have.
And it gets people go like Jeremiah Smith tweeted yesterday, the Ohio State receiver. And so like Rob asked this question in the chat as soon as we started the show. Is Jeremiah Smith really going to hit the portal? The guy tweeted yesterday, and I realized there's a Reddit screenshot out there of him liking an Instagram reel that called Ryan Day inept, but then he very quickly unliked it. But he tweeted yesterday and just massive attention on it because all it says is when you value and respect something, you give everything for it. That's it. That's all it says. And it's essentially everybody in the replies like, come to my school, come to my school, come to my, like the most relevant reply that my ex serves up to me is some guy saying, do you value DJ Lagway? Like, are we, this feels a little like crazy talk at this point, Ari, because this guy is the best receiver in the country at the school that is pumping receivers into the first round over and over and over again. Like I would think he's fine, but it's how crazy this makes everybody is the man can just tweet and all of a sudden, boom. Like,
well, it's an interesting case study because like I don't want to, we on this show we try to live in reality, and I don't know what kind of mood he was in or what he was liking on Twitter or whatever or Instagram. But let's just use him as an example. Again, don't clip this or say we said this is happening. I just want to use it as an example. If Jeremiah Smith, a person who is at a college that has routinely made first-round draft picks at his position, and he is 2 years away from the NFL, and he finds that the receiver market is offering more for his position than Ohio State is currently paying him. Again, 1,000% hypothetical. For somebody like Jeremiah Smith, who I think could go to Navy and be a first-round pick, do you think that it makes sense for people in his position, even people who are already Ohio State legends in a lot of people's eyes, people who are at the place that are perfect for their NFL development and at also a place that, should be competing at the highest level? Is it going to be smart, not now, maybe now, or in the future for players like that who are already perfectly content to go make more money at this stage in their life?
I think if you're somebody like him, you have to think about the contented aspect of it. If you are content, probably stay content because he would be a first rounder anywhere he plays, which I realize is probably an argument to consider other places, but he's going to make obscene amounts of money. He's already doing well. My guess is Ohio State understands his value and will make sure that he is compensated commensurate with his value. So I don't know that I want to hop around too much if I'm somebody like that.
Yeah, and also too, like the likelihood that, like, if I don't know, I guess desperation meter and money paid out probably is a huge piece to this. But if you're at a place like Ohio State or Tennessee or Florida already, and you're really good and are producing, like, I just feel like the likelihood of you being outbid by another team like that's probably relatively small. But that said, what do we know about rich people? There's no such thing as too much or enough. And I think part of the reason why some people are very wealthy is because they are obsessed with the accumulation aspect of this, and not necessarily the need for it. And if I am somebody who has a generational talent the way that Jeremiah Smith does, like, I don't know that I would begrudge him for trying to maximize his income potential, even at this stage of his life. So that said, you have to have an agent and, a coach and, parents to, weigh whether or not taking an extra few $1,000s now is important enough to like risk your draft stuff. But again, like, he's going to get drafted.
I don't think if you're already in a position and you're pretty sure you're already in a position to be a first round draft pick, I don't think squeezing every penny out of the situation is necessarily wise.
Like the reward isn't worth the risk.
Right. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. Now, we did mention another receiver, Casey Concepcion at NC State. This is a situation where we know this guy's really good. There are some receiver desperate teams out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you put him on that, any of those teams. Like, imagine if Casey Concepcion played for Penn State right now. Like, you can't do this. They can't pick somebody up for the playoff run. But imagine if he was on their team right now, what would that change?
Yeah, and it's like you look at the logos there, and I don't know that Alabama or Auburn jump out to me, but like maybe a place like Colorado would be interesting. But like Penn State,
which is going to lose a bunch of good receivers.
Yeah, is Wester gone after this year?
I believe. I don't know that. He's draft eligible. I don't know that he's necessarily decided yet.
By the way, very underrated player. Like, there is a lot of attention, and rightfully so, on Travis Hunter. Like, Wester just produces every single game at a very high level. But like, I tweeted about this Concepcion last night, Andy. I was like, okay, Penn State, you know what to do, because it's like that's the number one criticism that I have of their current roster. And we can talk all we want about like James Franklin and has he turned a corner? He's faking punts. He's walking with a little swag. Like, did he give birth to a receiver in the last few weeks that I'm unaware of? Like, I don't know, like that.
Right.
you can ultimately change the fate of that team because they're going to be in a game where they need to make plays in the passing game. And if they don't have people getting open, then I don't care how much, shit he talks in a press conference. So,
Right.
but like, this is the step, right? Like, also too, being in this expanded playoff field and having an opportunity to compete at the highest level, like Penn State is probably going to learn a lot about itself, right? And I'm sure that
Mhm.
they know already that they need a receiver, and I'm assuming that they knew this, coming into the year. But you get a taste of making the playoff, making the Big Ten championship game. It's like, how do you take the next step in the progression of your program? You address your dire needs in the portal. And like, my hope for Penn State is that they go out and get this kid. I hope that Penn State can close, because the number one thing that I've, written about over the last 15 years when it comes to Penn State is that they've always been 4 players away from winning a national title. So go get those players. You need to go get them. And in the past, you had to go beat Ohio State in New Jersey for a 5-star running back. And it's not as hard anymore.
I want to tell you about Rhoback. I am wearing my Rhoback Performance hoodie right now. The most comfortable piece of clothing in my arsenal. I've got a bunch of them. Several have been stolen by my daughter. That's okay. I may have to just get more. You can load up on Rhoback hoodies, polos, Q-zips, the joggers, the new butter soft jogger material. It's awesome. Use the promo code Andy and get 20% off your first order. That's Rhoback, RHOBACK.com. Use the code Andy for 20% off your first order. You can be as comfortable as I am right now. And I am very cozy, very comfortable right now in my Rhoback. Ari.
It's more expensive, but it's not as hard.
Yeah.
They can go get this. Why can't Penn State go get this kid?
They can. Also, Micah Hudson from Texas Tech. Now, he's not like Casey Concepcion. Casey Concepcion is a demonstrated, proven commodity. He's a good wide receiver. We've seen it against good competition. Micah Hudson was a 5-star who got to Texas Tech, and unlike fellow 5-stars Cam Coleman, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, he did not blow up immediately. He was, I believe, down the list, sixth on the team in targets, according to our friend Max Olson at ESPN last year. So he's not proven, but the potential is there. This was the obviously the highest ranked recruit in Texas Tech's class. So that's another case where you've got potential at a position of need for so many. Like, is receiver the one where we're going to say the most teams need somebody right now?
You know what I think has happened? I think what's happened is that we have come to a place in the sport where there have been so many good receivers in the last few years that it has almost taken center stage for me. Like, where would you rank the receiver position in terms of importance in college football? Like, would you do defensive tackle, quarterback first?
Well,
and then
so quarterback's one, and then I kind of lump. I think there's 4 positions that you lump into the next group, and that's.
Can I guess them?
Yeah, sure.
Left tackle,
offensive tackle in general.
Offensive tackle, defensive tackle, edge rusher would be the 3,
and one more,
and corner.
Exactly. But I think receiver is now equal on that, or at least wide receiver 1. Now you can find guys that fit into certain roles, like a really good slot receiver. And those I think are a little bit easier to find, but like a legit wide receiver 1 who can play multiple spots, who can get open from multiple spots. I think you have to have one of those, and not everybody has one.
It's the guys who turn teams that can't move the ball into explosive teams. It's the guys that you can throw the ball to in 50-50 situations, and they turn them into 70-30s. Yeah. And, if you look back, and I'm still kind of amused by this, but like last year's college football playoff, if you look at the receivers that Texas had, and you look at the receivers that Washington had, like the team that ended up winning the national championship didn't. I mean, they had some nice players, but they didn't have any of those. Like, they didn't have Romo Dunze and Jalen Polk. You know what I mean? They didn't have Xavier Worthy on their team. They didn't have A.D. Mitchell. Like, most of the teams in the top 5-7 last year had those big time, like Marvin Harrison was on Ohio State. Malik Neighbors was, I mean, like those guys are really, really important. And like to have nobody you can get open to getting somebody like that, I think takes your offense from 80th to 30th, like just with in the snap of a finger.
Well, that's the Penn State thing we're talking about. And they've had to be creative. They found more creative ways to use Tyler Warren, who is a freak. But if they had just, like even if Keandre Lambert Smith had stayed, maybe that would have opened things up a little bit. And then,
but the question you have to ask about Penn State, though, and maybe that's not a fair question to ask anymore because, their new offense coordinator's a pretty bright guy.
Yeah.
But did receivers leave, even with Will Levis? Like there have been offensive players. And by the way, guys, big Will Levis investor now. I've been buying his stuff on the cheap.
Speaking of Panini. Yeah.
Speaking of Panini. That have left Penn State and gone on to do really good things elsewhere. And the question with Penn State to me has always been, do bad receivers, do they not get good receivers? Do they make good players in their offense in the past not functional? So, and that's a criticism for former offensive coordinators here. So they're moving, I think that they're as explosive as they possibly can be considering their limitations.
Right. And I think that will get better. Interesting question from Sailor Joe in the chat. Where do you think quarterback Thomas Castellanos lands? Can I offer a potential theory on Thomas Castellanos?
Because he's pretty explosive, isn't he? Like I know that it didn't work out well for him there at the end, but well,
do you remember where Castellanos played before he went to Boston College?
I believe I do. No, I don't remember.
UCF. Who recruited him to UCF? Gus
Malzahn.
Who just became the offensive coordinator at Florida State.
Gus Malzahn.
Who's a good running quarterback who fits really well into the Gus Malzahn, Mike Norvell offense?
Are you bringing it back to Castellanos?
I believe so. Now, there's other folks interested. There's a lot of people interested because he's pretty dynamic. But that would be an interesting situation. And I don't know. I don't know if he'd want to go back and play for Gus again. But I would love to see the fit in that situation.
Yeah, the thing that I'm always interested in too, and we kind of got a taste of this with Will Howard a little bit this year, is when players who have been explosive at smaller schools or places that aren't necessarily as traditionally stacked with talent, when you put those players on in teams with better players. It's like if they're explosive at BC and then Florida State goes out and gets another Keon Coleman and gets Castellanos. I have a hard time pronouncing his name for some reason.
Tom Brenneman doesn't, but that's okay.
I know he doesn't. Yeah. to drive deep to left field. Yeah. Castellanos.
You got it. You're doing it.
I think that could work, so yeah, it'll be, I do love that the transfer portal also is just like a big collection of biggest bag, but then also it ultimately comes down to previous relationships you happen to have with somebody.
Well, it's like connecting dots. So Jamari Butler goes in the portal yesterday. That's Nebraska's best returning defensive lineman because obviously they're losing Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher. But if you watch Jamari Butler play against Ohio State this year, you're like, oh my God, this guy could be awesome. So he announces he's entering the portal the same day that Tony White takes the Florida State defensive coordinator job. Well, where's Jamari Butler from? He's from Mobile, Alabama, right down I-10 from Tallahassee. Is he following? And because Tony White runs a 3-3-5. So if you're a D lineman that excels in a 3-3-5, you probably want to go play in a 3-3-5. And Nebraska may not be keeping the 3-3-5. So I don't know. That one, again, it may be that I just wrote a new coordinators column about Florida State for On3. That may be why all of this is in my head. I think Jamari Butler, there will be a market for him. Lots of people will want him because they saw how well he played this season. But I do enjoy the dot connecting of transfer portal season.
Yeah. And you have a beautiful mind that remembers who was a defensive line coach at UMass in 1963, who's still in the game. So like, it's like easier for you. I've got to like go back and look like, where did this guy coach again? Like you just have a very big gift of recalling things off the top of your head. So
no useful information in the instant recall though. That's the problem. Like useful for my daily life. Oh, my daughter has an orthodontist appointment today. Didn't remember that, but I do remember. Yeah, where Tino Sunseri was a GA. Caden Salter, Liberty quarterback, also in the transfer portal. where was Tino Sunseri a GA?
Yeah.
No, he was a GA at Florida State, actually. Because his dad, Sal, was on the staff there.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's good to know. Yeah.
But yeah, also another quarterback in the portal, Caden Salter, Liberty transfer. I don't know, like I feel like these moves, you also wonder if that has something to do with the head coach. Like, does that mean Jamie Chadwell's on the move? Like, could Jamie Chadwell get the UCF job?
Yeah. Also, was he QB1 right now?
In the portal? Probably. At the moment? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So
yeah. Putting him out on a roster with a bunch of players would be kind of fun.
Yeah. That would be very interesting, and it's something we thought might happen last year. We thought he might follow Hugh Freeze to Auburn, and he didn't. He stayed at Liberty. So this is going to be a really interesting.
I bet that would have helped him a little bit.
Just a little bit. He'd been there for the past 2 seasons, but
that would have been. I mean, Auburn might have won 3 more games this year because of that. How many? Yeah. What would you set the line of more wins on Auburn's schedule had they gotten Caden to go with them?
Oof. 4, 5, 6. We're talking about the past 2 seasons. Probably 6 or 7 more wins.
Year.
Oh, 4 or 5 more wins.
Yeah, they could have won 9, 10 games maybe. And that
because they were so close in so many of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is going to be a really interesting next couple of weeks.